Do you believe that certain people are born evil, or that the outside world shapes who they become? If you enjoy reading as much as I do, you may be familiar with the hit book trilogy called The Hunger Games, which follows the protagonist, Katniss, through the circumstances she's forced into by the main antagonist, President Snow. He's a man who consistently shows how little he cares for other people and how much he values power and wealth. This is demonstrated by forcing children from ages 12 to 18 to fight to the death in an arena, only allowing one victor to return home, as a means to show the districts how little power they possess and to suppress any uprisings they may wish to start. However, Suzanne Collins' book titled The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes allows readers a glimpse of the world through Coriolanus' eyes, and in turn see the perspective of a young, privileged capital citizen before he rose to power. Throughout the book, we're granted knowledge of how Coriolanus lives as a teenager, and flashbacks of when he was a young child, such as the following passage in Chapter 2. The endless dance with hunger had defined his life, not the very early years before the war, but every day since had been a battle, a negotiation, a game. How was it best to starve off hunger? Eat all the food at one meal, spread it through the day in dribs and drabs, wolf it down and chew every morsel to liquid. It was all just a mind game to distract himself from the fact that it was never enough. No one had ever let him have enough. During the war, the rebels had held the food-producing districts. Taking a page out of the capital's playbook, they'd tried to starve the capital into submission using food, or lack thereof, as a weapon. Now the tables had turned again, with the capital controlling the supply and taking it one step further, twisting the knife into the district's hearts with the Hunger Games. Amid the violence of the games, there was a silent agony that everyone of Panam had experienced, the desperation for enough sustenance to bring you to the following sunrise. That desperation had turned upstanding capital citizens into monsters. People who dropped dead from starvation in the streets became part of a gruesome food chain. One winter's night, Coriolanus and Tigris had slipped out of the apartment, scavenged some wooden crates they'd spotted earlier in an alley. On the way, they passed 3 bodies, recognizing one as that of a young maid who served tea so nicely at the Crane's afternoon gatherings. A heavy wet snow began falling, and they thought the streets deserted, but on the way home, a bundled figure sent them scurrying behind a hedge. They watched as their neighbor Nero Price, a titan in the railroad industry, carved the leg from the maid, sawing back and forth with a terrifying knife until the limb came free. He wrapped it in the skirt he ripped from her waist, and then bolted down the side street that led back to his townhouse. The cousins never spoke of it, even to each other, but it was burned into Coriolanus' memory. The savagery distorting Price's face, the white anklet and scuffed black shoe at the end of the severed limb, and the absolute horror of realizing that he too could now be viewed as edible. Coriolanus credited both his literal and moral survival to the Gramm's foresight early on in the war. His parents were dead, Tigris orphaned as well, and both children were living with their grandmother. With the new perspective that the book provides, we're allowed to draw conclusions of why Coriolanus prioritizes certain aspects of his life over others. As someone who was deprived of both money and power in his childhood, it makes sense why he would take pride in possessing them as he grew older. However, this book doesn't expect the reader to ignore President Snow's mistakes or forgive the atrocities he's committed against other characters. But it does provide insight on the question if people are born inherently evil or if society and different outside factors instead shape them that way. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.